Stop before you sell or spend an old coin. Welcome to Eagle Numismatic USA, where rare and historic coins are worth a closer look. Today, we examine the 1856 Flying Eagle cent, 1913 Liberty Head Nickel, 1950 D Jefferson Nickel, and 1916 D Mercury Dime. Stay with us, because each coin has a story you will not want to miss. The 1856 Flying Eagle cent is one of the most fascinating coins in early American numismatics because it was not originally intended to be a regular circulation issue. It was created during a major transition in United States coinage, when the mint was looking for a smaller and more practical replacement for the large copper cent that Americans had used for generations. The idea was revolutionary for its time. The new cent was much smaller than the old large cent, and used an alloy of 88% copper and 12% nickel. The design featured a powerful eagle in flight on the obverse, with the date beneath it, while the reverse carried the denomination inside a wreath. The Flying Eagle design was created by chief engraver James B. Longacre, and the new format helped introduce Americans to what would become the modern small cent. But here is where the story becomes especially interesting. The 1856 Flying Eagle cent was technically a pattern coin. Records indicate that at least 634 pieces were distributed to members of Congress and other influential people to help demonstrate and promote the proposed small cent. The exact number originally struck is still uncertain, and later restrikes make the surviving population even more complicated to determine. That history is one reason collectors consider the 1856 Flying Eagle cent such an important piece. It represents the moment when the United States was moving away from the old large cent and toward the smaller coins that Americans would become familiar with. The timing was critical. In February of 1857, Congress passed the Coinage Act that officially authorized the new small cent. Regular Flying Eagle cents then entered circulation in 1857, followed by another large production run in 1858. Together, those later issues became the official circulating members of the series, while the 1856 remained its unusual and highly sought-after beginning. There is another fascinating detail that collectors should know. The 1856 Flying Eagle cent exists in several varieties, and specialists also distinguish between original pieces and later restrikes. Some proof examples are believed to have been restruck after 1856, making authentication and attribution especially important when examining a valuable specimen. Condition can make an enormous difference. A heavily worn example can still be historically important, but an original specimen with strong detail and attractive surfaces can command a substantial premium. Modern grading records show that only a limited number of 1856 examples are certified in high mint state grades, which helps explain why exceptional pieces attract serious collector attention, and the market can be dramatic. Current PCG's price guide figures show how sharply values rise with grade, with listed values reaching into the tens of thousands of dollars for high-grade examples, and much higher for the finest certified pieces. These figures are guides rather than guarantees, because the actual selling price of any coin depends on its precise condition, originality, eye appeal, certification, and current collector demand. So if you ever come across an 1856 Flying Eagle cent, do not judge it simply by its size or face value. You could be looking at a coin connected directly to one of the most important transitions in American coinage. The 1856 Flying Eagle cent is more than an old 1-cent piece. It is a window into the birth of the modern American small cent, a coin that helped change the way everyday money looked and felt in the United States. And that remarkable history is exactly what makes this tiny coin such a major piece of American numismatics. The 1913 Liberty Head Nickel may be the most mysterious 5-cent coin in American numismatic history. At first glance, it looks like an ordinary Liberty nickel, a design that had already been produced by the United States Mint for decades. But the date 1913 changes everything. The Liberty Head Nickel was officially produced from 1883 through 1912. In 1913, The United States was preparing to replace the Liberty design with the new Buffalo nickel. Yet somehow, 5 Liberty head nickels dated 1913 appeared. Their exact origin has never been completely established, and that mystery is a major part of what makes these coins legendary. Only 5 genuine 1913 Liberty head nickels are known today. They are considered proof specimens, struck at the Philadelphia Mint, with the composition of 75% copper and 25% nickel. Each weighs 5 grams, measures about 21.2 millimeters, and has a plain edge. The circumstances surrounding their creation remain one of the great unanswered questions in American coin collecting. One leading theory is that the coins were produced around the time the mint was transitioning from the Liberty head design to the new Buffalo nickel. Another possibility is that they were struck as special pieces before the new design was fully established. What we do know is that they were never part of a normal 1913 circulation mintage. And that is an important distinction. When collectors talk about a 1913 Liberty head nickel, they are not talking about a rare coin that could have been sitting unnoticed in ordinary pocket change. The 5 known examples are extraordinary numismatic rarities, and their histories have been carefully documented for generations. The obverse carries the familiar portrait of Liberty wearing a coronet, surrounded by stars and the word Liberty. The reverse features the large Roman numeral V inside a wreath, along with United States of America and cents. The design itself is classic Liberty nickel, but the 1913 date makes this particular combination almost unbelievably scarce. The 5 specimens have passed through some of the most famous collections in American numismatics. One became known as the Eliasberg specimen and is regarded as the finest of the 5. Another became known as the Norweb specimen and is now part of the Smithsonian collection. The Beebe specimen is held by the American Numismatic Association Money Museum. Other examples, including the Walton specimen, have their own remarkable stories of disappearance, rediscovery, authentication, and ownership. The story of the Walton specimen is especially fascinating. After its owner, George Walton, died in a car accident in 1962, the coin effectively disappeared from the numismatic world. His family kept it for decades, believing that it had been declared counterfeit. Then in 2003, the coin was brought forward and examined by a team of experts. After being compared with the other known specimens, it was authenticated as genuine. The Eliasberg specimen has also produced astonishing results in the marketplace. In 1996, it sold for $1,485,000, becoming the first individual coin ever publicly sold for more than $1 million. It later changed hands for even greater amounts, including a reported $4,150,000 in 2005. In 2018, the same specimen brought $4,560,000 at auction. Those numbers should not be interpreted as the value of every Liberty head nickel. They apply to the genuine 1913 rarity, and even then, individual prices depend on the specific specimen, grade, provenance, certification, eye appeal, and market conditions. The 5 known coins are in a completely different category from ordinary Liberty nickels dated 1883 through 1912. That distinction is crucial for collectors. A genuine 1913 Liberty head nickel is not simply a coin with an unusual date. It is one of the most famous rarities in American numismatic history, with only 5 known examples and a history that still contains unanswered questions. So why does this little 5-cent coin command so much attention? It is the combination of mystery, rarity, history, and documented ownership. The date 1913 appeared at exactly the moment the Liberty nickel was disappearing from American coinage, creating a numismatic mystery that has survived for more than a century. And perhaps that is the most fascinating thing about the 1913 Liberty head nickel. We know what it looks like. We know where the 5 known examples have been. We know how extraordinary their auction histories have become. But we still cannot say with complete certainty exactly why those 5 coins were created. That unanswered question is what keeps the legend alive. The 1950 D Jefferson Nickel is a fascinating coin because its story is not simply about low mintage. It is a story about scarcity, speculation, hoarding, and the difference between a coin that was heavily promoted as rare and a coin that is genuinely difficult to find. Struck at the Denver Mint, the 1950 D Jefferson Nickel had a remarkably small production of just 2,630,030 pieces. That was the lowest mintage for any Denver Jefferson Nickel at the time, and it remains the lowest Denver mintage in the Jefferson Nickel series. The coin was designed by Felix Schlag and was made from 75% copper and 25% nickel. It weighs 5 grams, measures about 21.2 millimeters across, and has a plain edge. On the front, you see the familiar portrait of Thomas Jefferson, with the date 1950 and the small D mint mark identifying Denver. On the reverse is Monticello, Jefferson's Virginia home, surrounded by the inscriptions United States of America, E pluribus unum, and 5 cents. But when the 1950 D entered the world, collectors quickly noticed that something was different. Only a little over 2.5 million had been produced, an extremely low figure compared with many other Jefferson nickels. That low mintage triggered something that would become a major part of the coin's history. Collectors began saving them in large quantities, and dealers promoted the 1950 D as a major modern rarity. Huge numbers were removed from circulation and stored in rolls and bags. One documented account notes that a Texas dealer named A. J. Mitchell was believed to have controlled roughly 1 million examples, a remarkable portion of the entire mintage. The speculation became intense. By the 1960s, the coin had developed an almost legendary reputation among collectors and investors. According to PCGs, promotional activity helped drive the price of 1950 D rolls dramatically higher, with the reported $1,000 value for a full roll by 1964. Eventually, however, the speculative boom collapsed and the market began to recognize an important reality. Low mintage does not automatically mean extreme rarity. And this is where the 1950 D becomes a valuable lesson for anyone searching through old coins. Millions were saved precisely because people believed they would become valuable. As a result, the surviving population is much larger than the original mintage might suggest. PCGs estimates millions of examples survive, including substantial numbers in uncirculated grades. So while the 1950 D is absolutely an important key date in the Jefferson Nickel series, it is not a coin where every example is automatically worth a fortune. Condition is where the story changes. A circulated 1950 D can be collectible without commanding an extraordinary price. But high-grade examples with strong original surfaces can become much more desirable. Even more important is the condition of the steps on Monticello. Collectors often look for what is known as full steps, meaning the horizontal steps on Monticello are sharply defined with minimal interruption. Coins with exceptional full steps detail can bring substantial premiums because that level of strike quality is much harder to find. PCGs lists a separate full steps designation for the 1950 D and records an auction result of $17,250 for an MS67 full steps example. That is a perfect illustration of why the date alone does not determine value. The ordinary 1950 D and the finest certified examples can therefore exist in completely different price categories. A coin's grade, surface quality, strike, full steps, detail, eye appeal, certification, and current collector demand all matter. There is also an important historical lesson here. The 1950 D Jefferson Nickel became one of the classic examples of how market enthusiasm can influence the perceived rarity of a coin. Collectors were correct that the mintage was exceptionally low, but the enormous amount of hoarding meant that many more examples survived than the raw mintage number might lead you to expect. That does not make the coin unimportant. Quite the opposite. The 1950 D remains one of the most recognizable key dates in the Jefferson Nickel series and an essential issue for serious collectors. Its combination of low production, intense historical hoarding, and the possibility of finding superb full steps examples gives it a unique place in American numismatics. So if you find a 1950 D Jefferson Nickel, do not immediately assume you have found a fortune. But do not dismiss it either. Look carefully at the date. Look for the D mint mark. Examine Jefferson's portrait and the overall surfaces. Then turn the coin over and study Monticello. Most importantly, look closely at those steps. Because with the 1950 D Jefferson Nickel, the real story is not simply how few were made. It is how many were saved, how the market misunderstood their scarcity, and how exceptional examples can still stand apart from the thousands of ordinary survivors. The 1916 D Mercury Dime is one of the most important key date coins in the entire history of American coin collecting. At first glance, it is a small 10-cent piece. But look closer at the date and the D mint mark, because this particular combination represents the lowest mintage. Of the entire Mercury Dime series, the Denver Mint produced only 264,000 1916 D Mercury Dimes. That number is remarkably small compared with the more than 22 million struck at Philadelphia and more than 10 million struck at San Francisco that same year. The coin was designed by Adolf Alexander Weinman and contains 90% silver and 10% copper. It weighs 2.5 grams, measures 17.9 millimeters, and has a reeded edge. The obverse features Liberty wearing a winged cap, a design that has often been mistaken for the Roman god Mercury. That is why collectors commonly call this coin the Mercury Dime. Although its official design is known as Winged Liberty, on the reverse, you will find a fasces wrapped with bands, accompanied by an olive branch. The fasces represents authority and strength, while the olive branch represents peace. Together, the design gives this small silver coin an unusually powerful appearance for a 10-cent piece. But why was the 1916 D produced in such a tiny quantity? The answer appears to be connected to a change in production priorities at the Denver Mint. The entire mintage was delivered in late 1916, and the mint then shifted its attention toward producing quarters in response to Treasury demand. Dime production at Denver did not resume until 1917. That decision created a coin that would eventually become legendary. The 1916 D Mercury Dime did circulate, and many examples spent years passing from person to person before collectors fully recognized how scarce the issue was. By the 1930s, the growing popularity of coin collecting and inexpensive collecting boards helped bring the date into the spotlight. Demand increased, but the supply of genuine examples remained limited. Today, the 1916 D is considered rare in virtually every grade. PCGs notes that many surviving examples are heavily worn, with most surviving pieces grading no better than the lower circulated grades. Mint state examples are particularly scarce, and then there is the full bands designation. On the reverse of the Mercury Dime, collectors examine the horizontal bands crossing the fasces. When those bands are completely and sharply separated, the coin may qualify for a full bands designation. High-grade 1916 D examples with exceptional band detail can be especially desirable to advanced collectors. The market results showed just how dramatic the difference can become. A PCG's graded AU53 example with full bands sold for $7,475. A PCG's MS65 example sold for $25,200. While a high-grade MS65 full bands example brought $36,000 at auction. At the very top of the market, the numbers become extraordinary. PCG's records a $207,000 auction result for an MS67 example sold in 2010, but these auction results should never be treated as a guaranteed value for every 1916 D Mercury Dime. The actual worth of an individual coin depends heavily on its grade, surface quality, strike, toning, eye appeal, certification, full bands detail, and current market demand. There is another reason collectors need to be extremely careful with this date. The 1916 D is one of the most heavily counterfeited United States rare coins. One common deception involves taking a genuine 1916 Philadelphia Mercury Dime and adding a fake D mint mark. Because the difference between an ordinary 1916 and a genuine 1916 D can be enormous. Authentication is extremely important. PCGs specifically recommends third-party certification for this issue. Even on heavily worn examples, that means, if you ever encounter a 1916 Mercury dime, the first thing to do is not assume it is valuable. Look carefully at the mint mark. Examine the date and the overall surfaces. Then have the coin properly authenticated before making any major decision. The 1916 D Mercury dime is fascinating because its importance comes from several factors working together. It has the lowest mintage in the Mercury dime series. It belongs to the first year of an iconic American design. It was struck in 90% silver, and genuine examples have remained highly sought after for generations, more than a century after it was struck. This tiny silver dime continues to attract serious collectors because it represents one of the great combinations in numismatics. Extremely limited production, strong historical significance, intense collector demand, and a market where condition can make an enormous difference. The next time you see a Mercury dime, take a second look at the date. If it says 1916, and especially if you see a D beneath the date, you may be looking at one of the most famous key date coins in American numismatics.